is only a few days away. Everybody's got bills to pay, and with benefits frozen and inflation rising, things are tough out there. If you're struggling to make ends meet, there is no cabinet minister more important than David Gaulke, the man in charge of welfare. Let's uncork the Gaulke. He joins me now. Let me start off with the single easiest question I've asked anybody during 2017. How long have you been in power?
We've been in power since 2010 in coalition, obviously.
Is the correct answer.
Very good.
The reason I ask that is that when I talk to your colleagues about housing and mental health and many other issues, and they get very offended by the state of things, almost as if you are not responsible for what's going on at the moment. You are responsible, and you also accept that you are the man, basically, in charge of the safety net for the people at the bottom of the heap.
Yes, yes, and of course it's a huge task, and it's a great privilege to perform this role. Of course, there are various aspects of the welfare state that come together. So, you know, we work together in terms of issues on housing, in terms of mental health, and so on. But it's very important that we work together as a government. But when it comes to the benefit system, then obviously that's me.
I'm glad you said that. So, when it comes to the number of people sleeping rough tonight in England, how many people are, roughly speaking, are sleeping rough, and what has happened to that figure since you came to power?
Rough sleeping has gone up. I can't give you a number for what it will be tonight. It has gone up. As a government, we are committed to bringing that down. We want to halve it by 2022. We want to eliminate it by 2027.
It's gone up by 134% on your watch.
And we do need to bring that down, which is why, well, no, and that's why we need to bring it down. So, for example, we've got a Homelessness Reduction Act, which we have passed. Actually, it's a private member's bill with the government's backing, which is about trying to deal with this upstream. It's why will be spending £1 billion between now and 2020 on this, working with local authorities.
Been created on your watch. Because the last Labour government almost eliminated rough sleeping, and it's gone shooting up on your watch. 4,000 people tonight will be rough sleeping in this country. That is only part, of course, of the homelessness issue. Again, as compared with 2010, what about the number of children in temporary accommodation because their families are homeless?
Well, yes, I accept that that also has gone up. But if we're looking at what we're doing with
70% under the Conservatives.
And what we're doing to address this, as I said, we are spending £1 billion over the next 3 years on this. We are also, you know, we have got plans to, as I say, eliminate homelessness by 2027. When it comes to children, we've actually seen a fall of the number of children who are in absolute poverty since 2010, a fall of 200,000.
I'll come on to that.
When it comes to temporary accommodation, actually we made some changes in the budget last month in terms of how temporary accommodation works, which I think, again, is a sensible change. I accept there is much that we still need to do, but you know, the fact is that we are seeing fewer children in workless households, we're seeing fewer children in absolute poverty than we were in 2010.
Well, I'll come on to that, but do you accept the Public Accounts Committee, a very senior committee of MPs, say that part of the reason for increasing homelessness, part of the reason for rough sleeping, is connected to the sanctions regime that you're in charge of as universal credit rolls out?
No, well, I think you're bringing together a number of things there. When it comes to the sanctions regime, actually, we've seen fewer sanctions over 2017 than we did in 2016 and 2015, so the number of sanctions are coming down. But
I've got it wrong. Let me just read you this. This is the Public Accounts Committee in February. Sanctions have increased in severity in recent years and can have serious consequences such as debt, rent arrears and homelessness. Are they wrong?
It is the case that in the last couple of years the number of sanctions have fallen. Let's also remember that we have a welfare system that is based on conditionality, and rightly so. We pay money to people, but there are certain conditions that are in place. We do expect people to comply with those conditions. In some cases, where those conditions are not met, it is appropriate to have a sanction. If you don't have sanctions, essentially you don't have conditionality, and you don't change behaviour. And, you know, we've got to put this in the context where we have got 3 million more people in work than was the case in 2010. Part of that is because we have a benefits regime that does...
more aggressive.
Well, it
more
does
aggressive, it's more pointed, and it affects people's mental health and their homelessness as well.
It does place more conditions on people, and one of the reasons why I think we've got higher levels of employment, because we place conditions on people, that changes behaviour and that helps people get into work. Now, that's not to say that there aren't hard cases, cases where we get it wrong, and we want to work very hard to eliminate that. But I would defend the principle of saying, look, if we're going to give money to people, to actually lift people out of poverty on a sustainable basis, it's not just about giving them money, it's also about saying, what can we do and what can you do to get you into work?
I'm absolutely sure that you don't get up in the morning and think, how can I make people have mental breakdowns or become homeless and all the rest of it. But part of the problem, perhaps, is that your department doesn't really know very much about the effect of the sanctions that you're in charge of on actual people. Both the National Audit Office and the Public Accounts Committee have criticised your department for not knowing enough about the effect of sanctions in the real world, and your department has now accepted that.
Well, we're always looking to know more, to learn more, to have an understanding of everything that we do. But I come back to this point about having a benefit system that is designed to get people into work. And on the subject of mental health, and this is a sensitive point, and I'm not going to pretend for one moment that we have always got this right in every individual case. But we do know that getting people into work, giving people the benefit of working, the structure that provides, the self-esteem that provides, you know, work could really help mental health as well, and we shouldn't pretend otherwise.
But this is an argument where the professionals are on the other side to you. The British Psychological Society and all the other psychological bodies in the country wrote to the press recently, and they said their call on you to immediately suspend the benefit sanction system. We see evidence which links sanctions to destitution, disempowerment and increased rates of mental health problems. Vulnerable people with multiple and complex needs are being disproportionately affected.
Now, I think the task for us is to ensure that we have an increasingly personalised welfare state, a system that properly understands the circumstances that individuals are in, and that is a challenge for us, and I fully accept that. But the idea of walking away from conditionality within the benefit system, which is what those who advocate getting rid of sanctions are essentially advocating, I think would not only be unfair to the taxpayer, but actually unfair to a lot of claimants, because it's that conditionality that helps change behaviour and helps get people into work.
Part of the problem that you have inherited is that so much of the cuts that were made to work allowances have now been baked into the new universal credit system, and therefore you are cutting the overall amount of money for people on welfare at the moment by about £3 billion, and everybody seems to agree with that figure. Now, right at the beginning, when universal credit was first announced in 2010, the government said, your department said, that it would lift 350,000 children out of poverty. We've been talking about child poverty. And then a couple of years later, the figure dropped to 150,000. What is it now?
Well, I think it's difficult to make an assessment at the moment, but I come back to this point, and universal credit is really important here. What universal credit will do is help get more people into work.
You made the assessment in 2010 and in 2014, and you're not revealing a number now, because the truth is the way that you're implementing this system is you're actually going to put more people, children, into poverty, not fewer. Well, not raise them up.
I come back to what I was saying earlier. If you look at what our record, if you look at our record,
true, isn't it?
If you look at our record, we have lifted more children out of absolute poverty, and the fact remains that universal credit is going to be already a very effective means by which we can get more people into work and more people who are in work progressing in work. And that is the best way of lifting.
I'm only going to read one critic out to you. This is the well-known Marxist kind of agitator group, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, Corbynites and Momentum supporters to a man and woman. If the government sticks to the planned benefits cuts, it said, it should not be surprised if absolute child poverty rises. Every region and nation is projected to see an increase in child poverty. Among around 3/4 of that increase, equivalent to 400,000 children, is attributable to benefit changes.
Well, I'd make the point that the Institute for Fiscal Studies, which is a fine organisation, but has been predicting increases in child poverty for some years now, which have not happened. Now, why is that not
not going to happen in the future?
Well, why has it not happened? Is because we have got an economy that has created a lot of jobs, and in particular, pay at the lower end has risen faster than elsewhere. It's why income inequality has actually fallen over the last 7 years. And in order to address this issue of child poverty, what is absolutely key is that we continue to have a job-creating economy and that we see pay rising at the bottom end. That's what has happened over the last 7 years, and that's what we need to continue to see.
People can make their judgments about that, but let me ask you about your big announcement today, which is auto-enrolment in pensions. Another 900,000 youngish people are being automatically enrolled into the pension scheme. Why?
Well, we believe that what we've seen over the last few years, since auto-enrolment came into place in 2012, is much greater saving for pensions. After decades of declines in workplace pension saving, we are now seeing increases. We want to extend that benefit to people under the age of 22. At the moment, the starting point was 22. We're now lowering that to 18. That's the announcement that we're making today. That, I think, will get more people into the habit of saving. It will mean that younger people will be saving for those extra years, so that obviously is significant when it comes to their retirement. And so extending the benefit of auto-enrolment, which I think everybody agrees has been a huge success, is a really important next step. Over the next couple of years, we're going to see increases in the contribution rates.
That might put people off, of course.
It might do, and the challenge here is to get the balance right. We believe that the next years, the increase in the contribution rates for employers and employees strikes that balance. The evidence so far is that the opt-out rates from auto-enrolment have been lower than people expected, and in particular lower for younger people. So people in their 20s have been saving more than I think anyone particularly expected. Now that's encouraging, and this is building on that success.
All right, this week you sit round the cabinet table with the Prime Minister and she asks each one of you, David, are you a converger or a diverger? What's your answer?
Well, my view is that clearly the British people have made a decision on the EU.
Or a D?
Well, it is more complex than that. I think, as the Prime Minister has rightly said, we're not looking for a kind of EEA type arrangement, so that essentially it's continuity, as far as the end state is concerned. But it is also important that we maximise our access to the European markets. That's really important to
eating
the
cake,
UK.
still have cake.
Well, we're going to have a negotiation. My view is that we need to make sure that we get the right result for the UK, and I think Theresa May is the right person to deliver that.
Surprise, surprise. David Gaulke, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. Now, as I said at the top of the show, it has been quite a year. This is the moment we look back over the highlights and the low moments, both. But here and now we can do it entirely through the prism of Sunday morning.